إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فإن أحسن الكلام كلام الله وخير الهدى هدى محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وإن شر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. So in the previous lesson we finished the brief discussion of Shaykh Muhammad Aman al-Jaami rahimahullah on the second nullifier, on the second of the 10 nullifiers. And so today we're going to proceed with Shaykh Ubayd al-Jabiri's commentary. So we'll start by reading the text again. So the second nullifier, الثاني من جعل بينه وبين الله وسائط يدعوهم ويسألهم الشفاعة ويتوكل عليهم كفر إجماعا. So this means the second nullifier, whoever makes or places between himself and between Allah intermediaries, he invokes them, he asks them intercession and relies upon them. Such a one disbelieves by consensus. So the Shaykh says, Hafizahullah, that this nullifier, which is to take intermediaries, what is intended by the people who take these intermediaries, what they intend by this are two essential things. There are two things that they basically engage in. The first is that they make tawakkul upon them, so their heart now becomes attached to these people and their reliance is now centered around these intermediaries. And the second thing that they revolve around is that they seek, that they ask, they request intercession, ash-shafa'ah, from them. Now the Shaykh says that in order to understand this issue very clearly, and so that the affair becomes very, very clear, it's important that we actually understand the word wasita. Without understanding the word wasita, then we will not have a clear understanding of this issue. So every Muslim, male and female, should know that the so-called intermediaries, the wasa'it, the various types, then they fall into three categories, meaning that these are the intermediaries people use in order to reach Allah. Right? So all the intermediaries, they fall into three categories, and these intermediaries, what we mean by them is that intermediaries whom we use in order to reach Allah. We go through them in order to reach Allah. Now there can be three different things which are intended by this. Or, to put it another way, there are three types of intermediaries. So the Shaykh says, the first type, al-qism al-awwal, this is the intermediary of at-tabligh from Allah, which means the intermediaries who convey from Allah. They convey from Allah to the people, and they convey knowledge about His command and His prohibition and His khabar. Khabar is His information, because in the Quran, the revelation, it consists of three things. If you look at the whole of the Quran, it falls into three categories. There is khabar. Khabar is simply Allah informing us of things. For example, about the affairs of the unseen, the stories of the prophets, paradise, hellfire. This is khabar. This is just information about things, about people, places, history, events, the future, paradise, hellfire, day of judgment, and so on and so forth. This is khabar. And then there is command, al-amr, and then there is prohibition, which is al-nahi. So these intermediaries are the ones who bring this information, who bring this from Allah, and they convey it. And these particular intermediaries are ones which only Allah Azza wa Jal chooses, meaning that He is the one who makes certain people to be these types of intermediaries. And these intermediaries are the ones who convey this information to the servants, to the slaves of Allah Azza wa Jal, in order that they may know what is obligatory upon them towards their Lord, what rights are due from them towards their Lord, and also so that they know how to worship Allah Azza wa Jal and how they can make the religion purely and sincerely for Him alone. Now this wasita, this type of intermediation, this wasita, they are the angels alayhimu salatu wasalam and His messengers alayhimu salatu wasalam. Right? So these are the first type of intermediaries, and they are the intermediaries of conveyance, of tabligh, conveyance, tabligh. And so there are angels who are messengers and men who are messengers. And in this regard, Allah Azza wa Jal, He said, Allahu yastafi min al-malaika wa rusulan wa min al-nas inna Allaha sami'un basir. Indeed, Allah chooses from amongst the angels as messengers. Allahu yastafi min al-malaikati rusulan wa min al-nas inna Allaha sami'un basir. Indeed, Allah chooses from the angels as messengers, or He chooses messengers from the angels, and likewise from the people. Indeed, Allah is all-hearing, all-seeing. Surah Al-Hajj, Surah 22, verse number 75. 22, verse number 75. Also, another ayah in the Quran, إِنَّا أَوْحَيْنَا إِلَيْكَ كَمَا أَوْحَيْنَا إِلَى نُوحٍ وَالنَّبِيِّينَ مِنْ بَعْدِهِ. Indeed, we inspired to you as we inspired to Nuh and the prophets who came after him. And also رُسُلًا مُبَشِّرِينَ وَمُنذِرِينَ لِأَلَّا يَكُونَ لِلنَّاسِ عَلَى اللَّهِ حُجَّةٌ بَعْدَ الرُّسُلِ وَكَانَ اللَّهُ عَزِيزًا حَكِيمًا. We sent messengers who bring good news and who warn, so that the people do not have any proof against Allah after the sending of the messengers. And Allah is mighty and wise. Surah An-Nisa, Surah 4, verse 163 and 165, that passage. So, now that we've clearly understood this first type of intermediary, then any person who responds to these intermediaries, he responds to them, he responds to the messengers, and he complies to what they brought, he complies with it and he follows it, then these people are upon guidance. They are upon clear guidance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the one who is arrogant and does not respond to them, and he rejects their call, then these people are the rejecting disbelievers, the rejecting unbelievers. So this is clear now. The people towards them are of two categories. The intermediaries of conveyance are the believers who follow them and comply and follow the guidance and act upon it. They're upon guidance from the Lord. And those who reject them, they reject them outright. And so they are the kuffar, disbelievers. They are the mukaddibun al-mukaddibun. Now, in the Quran, Allah Azza wa Jal has mentioned to us the information, the stories regarding the people who follow His messengers, and how He has prepared for them a great reward, a good end. And He's also told us about the story of those who rejected His messengers, rejected these intermediaries, and how they were arrogant. And He's explained how He has prepared for them punishment and an evil end. And this is frequent in the Quran when you read the stories of all of the various prophets, the prophets and messengers, in fact, and you find this is abundant in the Quran. And this will become apparent to anyone who has, reads or has memorized a good portion of the Quran. So this then is the first type of intermediary. The second type of intermediary, the second type of wasita. Now this second type of wasita is actually a branch of the first type of wasita. It's a branch of the first type of wasita. And these are the people of knowledge, Ahlul Ilm. And the reason why they are mentioned is because of the important role that these intermediaries play after the final messenger Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because there is no intermediary of conveyance after Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and so therefore the scholars are a branch of that first intermediary. They are the inheritors, warathatul anbiya. They are the inheritors of the prophets, and they are from the companions of the prophet and the followers of the prophet. So in this regard we see numerous ahadith. For example, the famous hadith, وَإِنَّ الْعُلَمَاء وَرَثَةُ الْأَنْبِيَاءِ فَإِنَّ الْأَنْبِيَاءَ لَمْ يُوَرِّثُوا دِينارًا وَلَا دِرْهَمًا وَإِنَّمَا وَرَّثُوا الْعِلْمَ مَنْ أَخَذَهُ فَقَدْ أَخَذَ بِحَظٍّ وَافِرٍ. Indeed, the scholars are the inheritors of the prophets, and indeed the prophets do not leave neither dinar nor dirham as inheritance, but they leave knowledge. They leave knowledge. So whoever takes from this knowledge has taken a great portion. So clearly then here the virtue of the scholars, they are mentioned as those who take the inheritance from the prophets. And the prophet's inheritance is knowledge. So they inherit this from Muhammad sallallahu and the other Sahaba, and they conveyed it to those who came after them, who took it from their prophet. They never added anything to it, nor did they take anything away from it. Right? So basically they left it intact exactly as they received it. The companions did not play with this knowledge, add anything to it, change it, distort it, take it anything away. They took it and they conveyed it. And for that reason, that whatever the Sahaba were agreed upon, it is obligatory to take that as being from the religion. It is ijma', it is consensus. It is obligatory to submit to that and to follow that. And no one turns away from it except one who is misguided, is a person of desires, or he is ignorant. It's only one or two situations. Either you are ignorant of that truth, meaning of that knowledge, that inheritance as conveyed by the Sahaba. So either you are ignorant of it, you don't know it, or you are someone who's actually misguided upon knowledge. You are someone who follows his desires and he chooses other than the guidance of the companions. Now the ignorant person, the Shaykh says, he's excused because he's ignorant, and upon him is to remove ignorance from himself. He's excused so long as he is genuinely ignorant. But if he is someone who has the ability to know, he has the ability to find out, he has the ability to ask and to remove that ignorance from himself, but he chooses not to do so, so he remains ignorant, meaning now he chooses to remain ignorant, not that he was ignorant, unknowingly, not on purpose. So then this person no longer has an excuse. He would no longer have an excuse. So in any case, and this is because he must know what is obligatory upon him individually, as an individual, in terms of his deed. So we also see in other ahadith, which also mention the scholars, for example, إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَبْعَثُ لِهَذِهِ الْأُمَّةِ على رأس كل مئة سنة على رأس كل 100 سنة من يجدد لها دينها. Indeed, Allah sends to this ummah at the end of every 100 years على رأس كل 100 سنة من يجدد لها دينها, the one who will revive the deen for them. The one who will revive for the ummah its deen. So clearly from this hadith we can see that this nation is one that respects its scholars, especially those who give attention to the sunnah and who revive the sunnah and who give advice to this nation in terms of what Allah has made obligatory upon them, and they do this by purifying the sunnah and teaching the sunnah and so on and so forth. So these scholars, they are like a fortress and a protection, a strong protection for this nation. This is what these scholars are. Also in another hadith, famous hadith, in which Allah Azza wa Jalla, He mentions, إِنَّ اللَّهَ تَعَالَى لَا يَنْتَزِعُ الْعِلْمَ انْتِزَاعًا مِنْ صُدُورِ الْعُلَمَاءِ ولكن يقبض العلم بقبض العلماء حتى إذا لم يبق عالم اتخذ الناس رؤوسا جحالا فسئلوا فأفتوا بغير علم فضلوا وأضلوا. Indeed, Allah does not take knowledge by snatching it from the hearts of the scholars, but He takes knowledge by taking away the scholars. Until when there is not left any scholar, the people take the ignorant as leaders. When they are asked, they give verdict without knowledge, and so they go astray and they lead others astray. So again, this is like another hadith in the same, in the same vein as what came before, which is that the scholars are there to be respected, and because Allah Azza wa Jalla has made them to be the inheritors of the prophets, and they are the ones who convey from Allah Azza wa Jalla to the people. Now, at this point, so we've discussed in this lesson so far, we're looking at the second nullifier, and in relation to that, it is al-wasita, taking intermediaries. And we said that in order to understand the issue of al-wasita properly and thoroughly, we need to know what this word actually means. What does it mean to be an intermediary? And we said there are three types of intermediary. The first type of intermediary are those whom Allah specifies and makes to be prophets and messengers who convey from Him to the people. And they are the prophets and messengers. And they are in fact the messengers from the angels and the messengers from the men. And so they convey Allah's khabar, amar and nahi. Khabar, amar and nahi. His knowledge, his information and His command and His prohibition to the people. And so therefore the people in relation to this intermediary are rather those who believe in them or those who disbelieve in them. The second type of intermediary, which is what we are discussing now, are those who are the scholars. They are a branch from the first. They are a branch of the first intermediary. And they are the scholars because the scholars are the inheritors of the prophets. They are the inheritors of the prophets and the messengers. So they likewise convey to the people. The first of them are the Sahaba and then the Tabi'een. And they convey to the people the deen of Allah Azza wa Jal. Then we see in the texts, in the Quran and the Sunnah, we see many texts which indicate the role of the scholars. So we mentioned some of those texts already. The hadith about the scholars being the inheritors of the prophets. The hadith about Allah sending a reviver at the head of every 100 years. The hadith about Allah not snatching away knowledge by snatching it from the hearts, but by taking away the scholars and indicating the importance of the scholars. So once all that's clear, the Shaykh goes on to mention that we must also understand at this point what is the meaning of ilm. When ilm is used in the Sharia, then, or when it is used in the text, then it only means al-ilm al-shar'i. Al-ilm al-shar'i. It only means Sharia knowledge. And the definition of this knowledge is فقه الكتاب وفقه سنة النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم على سيرة السلف. على سيرة السلف الصالح, to understand the book of Allah and the sunnah of his Prophet ﷺ upon the way of the Salaf al-Salih, upon the Sahaba and anyone who followed them upon righteousness and ihsan in the first 3 generations. Right, so this is the knowledge that we are speaking of. And the Shaykh mentions the hadith, خَيْرُ النَّاسِ قَرْنِي ثُمَّ الَّذِينَ يَلُونَهُمْ ثُمَّ الَّذِينَ يَلُونَهُمْ. Indeed, the best of people are my generation, then those after them, then those after them. Okay, so now this is clear that the second type of intermediary are the scholars, and that's because they are the inheritors of the prophets, therefore they are a branch of the first intermediary, and they convey knowledge. And anyone who chooses other than their way, he is either a jahil or he is a dalun sahibu hawa. Right? So remember, the first intermediary, which are the prophets and messengers, either you are someone who responds to them, so you are a believer, or you are someone who rejects them, so you are a disbeliever. They are the categories. The second intermediary now, which are the scholars, and we mean here the scholars from the Sahaba and whoever is upon their way, then those who respond to them are of a number of types. Either one is a follower of them upon knowledge, or one is a jahil, he's ignorant in affairs, and upon him is to remove his ignorance, or he is a person of desires who chooses other than their way. He chooses other than their way. So this obviously is the various firaq and the jama'at, the groups and the sects who have gone astray. So the ignorant people are the ones who come out. They try to invite the people upon jahl, upon ignorance, no knowledge. So they tell stories, fabrications, fabricated ahadith, weak ahadith, and so you see their ilm doesn't have any ground, and they are upon jahl. And the second are the people of desires, the innovators, the misguided people, people of ra'i, people of qiyas, the people, this type of group who have swerved away from the truth. So in this regard, we have a number of statements from the Salaf. The first of them is Umar al-Faruq radiyallahu anhu. He said, إِيَّاكُمْ وَأَهْلُ الرَّأِي أَعْدَاءُ السُّنَنِ أَعِيَّتْهُمْ أحاديث رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أن يحفظوها فقالوا بالرأي فضلوا وأضلوا. Beware of the people of opinion, the people who speak with opinion. They are the enemies of the Sunnah. To memorize a hadith, they were incapable. They were incapable of memorizing the hadith of the Messenger of the Sallam. So they started speaking with ra'i, with opinion. And so they went astray and led others astray. This is Umar bin al-Khattab warning us from the likes of these people who are from this category of those who are people of desires. And also the statement of al-Sha'bi rahimahullah. So he says, al-Sha'bi says, beware of those who use analogy, those who make analogies which are baseless. For by him in whose hand is my soul, if you were to adopt this qiyas and proceed with this type of making analogies, you would make halal what is haram, you would make haram what is halal. So whatever has come to you from the one who has memorized from the companions of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then take it. Or he said, then take from it, hold on to it. So, to end the first 2 intermediaries, these 2 intermediaries are praiseworthy. Right? The first one, prophets and messengers, and the second, the scholars. The scholars, the inheritors of the prophets. To take from them, to respond to them, this now is praiseworthy. So this now brings us to the third type of intermediary. The third type of intermediary. And this is the one which is intended in this Nawaqid. So in the Nawaqid, this is the one that we are intending. And this is an intermediary which makes up this Nawaqid, which is extremely dangerous, and it is obligatory to be aware of it. And the reason is because what these people have done, the evil scholars, is they've come and they've taken this issue, this intermediary, and what they've done is they've portrayed when a person worships Allah alone, singles out Allah in worship and follows the sunnah and sticks to the sharia ways and means, they portray all of this as being a disrespect of the righteous people. Right? So this is how they portray it, that you are disrespecting the righteous people. And on the other side, the ghulu, the exaggeration that they fall into when they worship their saints, when they invoke them, when they ask them, give them uluhiyya and so on and so forth, they portray that as loving the righteous people. Right? So what they're doing is they are reframing these two things. They are reframing Tawheed to be disrespect, belittlement of the righteous people. And they are reframing giving uluhiyya to others, worshipping others besides Allah. They are reframing this and making it to appear as love of the righteous people. Love of the righteous people. So now basically the issue has been turned from what it ought to be to one which centers around love of the righteous people or belittlement of them. Love of the righteous people or belittlement. They've turned the scales into this. So rather than it being making the deen purely and sincerely for Allah alone and worshipping only Him alone and invoking Him alone and so on and so forth, they've moved it from that and they've centered it around the righteous people. So it's either love of them or it's disrespect of them. And love of them is to basically worship them. And to disrespect them is to worship Allah alone. Right? So this is how they've changed the scales and they've reframed the whole thing. Now, this type of shirk is the same type of shirk that the Quraysh, the mushriks of Quraysh, and whoever was upon their deen, it is what they were upon when the Messenger of Allah was sent to them. So now the question arises, now that we understand what they mean by wasita. What do they mean by wasita? They mean these righteous people whom they claim they are loving and respecting, but by worshipping them. Right? This now is their wasita. These worshipped things, these worshipped entities, beings, they now are what they mean by wasita. To us, it is the prophets and messengers and the scholars who convey knowledge. We reach Allah through them by way of what they convey of knowledge. What these people are doing is they are taking these intermediaries and they intend two things from them. They actually intend two things from them. There are two things that they basically which have led them to this. The first of them is طلب الشفاعة, which is to seek intercession. They want intercession. They're seeking intercession from these people. And this is very clear in the ayah, Surah Yunus, verse number 18, 10:18, the famous ayah that we ought to know. وَيَعْبُدُونَ مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ مَا لَا يَضُرُّهُمْ وَلَا يَنْفَعُهُمْ وَيَقُولُونَ هَؤُلَاءِ شُفَعَاؤُنَا عِنْدَ اللَّهِ. They worship besides Allah what does not harm them nor benefit them, and then they say, these are our interceders with Allah. قُلْ أَتُنَبِّئُونَ اللَّهَ بِمَا لَا يَعْلَمُ فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَلَا فِي الْأَرْضِ سُبْحَانَهُ وَتَعَالَى عَمَّا يُشْرِكُونَ. Say, are you informing Allah with what He does not know in the heavens nor in the earth? Glory be to Him, or sublime be He, and exalted is He from what they associate with Him. Now, in this ayah you can see that these people, Allah likened to what they do, they called it ibadah. And then He said their statement, which is, they say, these are our interceders with Allah. So Allah criticized them for this action. And, anyone who does the same action as this, he enters into this ayah. This is because ash-shafa'ah, intercession, belongs only to Allah. Intercession belongs only to Allah. No one is able to intercede except after Allah's permission, and only after Allah is pleased with the one who is being interceded for. And we spoke about this in the previous lesson, about the types of intercession and how intercession with Allah Azza wa Jal does not work in the same way as the intercession with the kings. And these people have made a false analogy between what takes place in the world in relation to the various types of intercession, between the kings and their ministers and between people. And they've presumed, or they've made an analogy between that and between how intercession is with Allah. And they are not the same, because when we look at the kings of this world and the leaders of this world, number one, they can often be ignorant of the needs of their servant. Number two, they may not desire to benefit the servants. Number three, their ministers can come any time without permission and put pressure on them to do something for the servants or intercede for the servants, right? To intercede for the subject, sorry. So this is how it is in the creation. But Allah Azza wa Jal, He is the king, the master, the all-knowing. He knows everything about His servants. Number two, no one can make Him do anything against His will. Right? He does whatever He wills. Number three, no one can intercede with Him except after His permission. No one can come along and say, unless He's given permission. No one can do that on Yawm al-Qiyamah. Rather, only after He's given permission, and only for the one whom He's pleased with, which is the people of Tawheed. This is how intercession is with Allah Azza wa Jal. So we covered this in the previous lesson. So what these people are doing then is, number one, the two things that I've made important to this. The first one is seeking shafa'ah. So they want shafa'ah, and they've made these righteous people to be the intermediaries. And so they worship them, thinking that they are the intermediaries between them and between Allah by way of the intercession. Right? That's how this is the basic model, how it is with them. And with the people of Tawheed and Sunnah, it is that the prophets and messengers are the intermediaries. They convey knowledge of what Allah wants from His servants. So they follow and they implement that, and as a result of that, Allah will grant them the shafa'ah on Yawm al-Qiyamah. Right? Whereas with these people, the model is slightly different. Right? They've taken the righteous people through whom they will ask directly for shafa'ah and invoke them, thinking this is, that these people have the right to make shafa'ah with Allah, when they don't. Shafa'ah does not belong to them, it belongs to Allah. قُلْ لِلَّهِ الشَّفَاعَةُ جَمِيعًا Surah Al-Zumar 39:44. 39:44. And likewise the statement, وَلَا تَنْفَعُ الشَّفَاعَةُ عِنْدَهُ إِلَّا لِمَنْ أَذِنَ لَهُ. Intercession will not avail anyone, will not benefit anyone, except the one for whom He has permitted. Surah Saba 34, verse number 23. So in this ayah, Allah Azza wa Jal, He basically rebuked them and criticized them for what they did. Now this is the first thing that has led them into taking these as intermediaries. The second thing that led them is seeking nearness. Talab al-qurbah. Seeking nearness. What do they mean by this? What they mean by this is that they say that we are not able to reach Allah directly. Rather, we must follow a path which will lead us to become close to Allah. And in this regard, Allah Azza wa Jal, He says in a passage at the beginning of Surah Al-Zumar, إِنَّا أَنزَلْنَا إِلَيْكَ الْكِتَابَ بِالْحَقِّ فَاعْبُدِ اللَّهَ مُخْلِصًا لَهُ الدِّينَ أَلَا لِلَّهِ الدِّينُ الْخَالِصِ وَالَّذِينَ اتَّخَذُوا مِن دُونِهِ أَوْلِيَاءَ مَا نَعْبُدُهُمْ إِلَّا لِيُقَرِّبُونَا إِلَى اللَّهِ زُلْفَى إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَحْكُمُ بَيْنَهُمْ فِيمَا هُمْ فِيهِ يَخْتَلِفُونَ إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَهْدِي مَنْ هُوَ كَاذِبٌ كَفَّارٌ. So in this passage, we see first of all verses 2 to 3 at the beginning of Surah Al-Zumar, Surah 39. Indeed, we have revealed to you the book in truth. So worship Allah, making the religion purely and sincerely for Him alone. Verily to Allah belongs all the religion. And those who take allies, awliya, besides him, they say, we do not worship them except that they may bring us closer to Allah. Indeed, Allah will judge between them in that wherein they differ. Indeed, Allah does not like the one who is a liar, a disbeliever. Kadhibun kafar. Now, from this ayah we learn a number of things. We can see Allah Azza wa Jalla is clearly blaming these people for what they have done. Before we do that though, we can see that there are clearly two things that this verse contains as general principles. Number one is the obligatory of worshipping Allah alone. Ikhlas to Allah in worship, number one. And number two, obeying and following the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Why? Because he said at the beginning, Inna anzalna ilayka al-kitaba bil-haq fa'budillah mukhlisan lahu-d-din. So the book was sent down. So we've been ordered to send the book, and the book was sent to the messenger. So therefore we are ordered to make ittiba. So the first ayah in this passage, verse number 2, indicates ikhlas and ittiba, Tawheed and mutaba'a. Right? So that's the first thing we should know very clearly. Then the next verse, it speaks about those people who are being criticized, are being reviled and rebuked. What have they done? They've opposed the verse that came before. Right? First of all, they are claiming this wasita, and they are claiming it is qurba. They're basically claiming this is qurba. But look at what word Allah Azza wa Jal used in the ayah. He said, وَيَعْبُدُونَ. Sorry, that's the previous verse. He said in this one, مَا نَعْبُدُهُمْ. So he spoke, he mentioned what they are saying, or their statement, and he said of them, مَا نَعْبُدُهُمْ, using the word here, ibadah. So he described what they are doing as ibadah. And so what does this show to us? It shows that changing the name of something doesn't change its reality. Do you understand? If someone says, oh, I'm just seeking a wasita, or if someone says, I'm just seeking qurba, that doesn't change the reality of what it is. Right? Allah Azza wa Jal, He cited them and said of them, مَا نَعْبُدُهُمْ. So He said of them that, they say, we do not worship them. So He ascribed worship to them. Just like in the previous verse, when they are هَؤُلَاءِ شُفَعَاؤُنَا عِنْدَ اللَّهِ, at the beginning of the ayah He said وَيَعْبُدُونَ مَا لَا يَضُرُّهُمْ وَلَا يَنْفَعُهُم. So they're using the word shafa'ah, but Allah Azza wa Jalla using the word, speaking of them, saying وَيَعْبُدُونَ ibadah. Right? So changing the name of something, whether you say I'm seeking walaya, I'm seeking shafa'ah, I'm seeking qurba, I'm seeking wasila, all these are names that people are going to use, right? Those names don't change the actual realities. And the realities in these two verses make it clear that these two things are ibadah in the way that they are doing it. So, that's the first thing. Second thing is this very strong, severe threat in this ayah, in which Allah Azza wa Jal, He says, إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَحْكُمُ بَيْنَهُمْ فِي مَا هُمْ فِيهِ مُخْتَلِفُونَ. Indeed, Allah will judge between them regarding that wherein they differed. Now, once all of this is clear, meaning that Allah Azza wa Jal, in this ayah, who will He judge by? Who will He judge between? He will judge between these people who are doing this worship, and between the righteous people whom they were worshipping. Allah will judge between the two. Right? The ones being worshipped and the ones doing the worshipping. Allah will judge between the two. Now, we finish this lesson with something that follows on from this very point, which is that those who are taken as deities besides Allah are of two types. Right? Those who are taken as deities besides Allah are of two types. The first of those are those who are totally innocent from the servants of Allah Azza wa Jal. Right? And they are free of those who worship them, who took them as objects of worship. And likewise, they will be free of them in the hereafter. They will be free of them in the hereafter. Who are these? These are the angels and the prophets and the righteous. Right? So the angels and the prophets and the righteous who are worshipped in this life, like for example you have Isa alayhi salam, and from the righteous you have many of the righteous scholars among the Muslim nation, right? And the angels, they will be completely innocent and free. Why? Because they never called anyone to worship them, right? So this is the first category, and Allah Azza wa Jal will absolve this group from those who will come along who are guilty of worshipping them. These will be innocent and free and absolved. And when they absolve themselves and they say, "Oh our Lord, we did not ask them to worship us," so they will free themselves, and when they declare themselves free, they will be truthful in what they are saying. Right? They will be truthful. That's the first group. The second group are those who in the life of this world, they were pleased that they were being worshipped. They were pleased that they were taken as intermediaries. They were pleased that the people were asking them for the removal of their afflictions and for the fulfillment of their needs and their wants and for intercession with Allah Azza wa Jal, whilst they were alive or whilst they were dead. Right? These people were pleased. For example, there might be one person, right, some peer or someone, and he's pleased that the people come to him, fulfillment of, seek cure from illness, seek intercession, seek fulfillment of the needs, seek repulsion of harm. He's pleased with that. And then he dies whilst being pleased that they should continue upon this after his death. So while he's dead now, the same thing is taking place whilst he's dead. Right? These people now, when they are resurrected on the Day of Judgment, what these people will do is when they recognize the truth, they will also free themselves as well. They will say, "We've got nothing to do with you and your worship." Right? But will that be accepted from them? And the answer is no. And this type of argumentation between the people of falsehood, those who worship the ones who were worshipped, this is mentioned a number of times in the Quran. It's mentioned that one group will free themselves from the other group. And the other group will say, "Well, we didn't command you to do it." This is the argument of the people of the hellfire. Right? So both of these people are in the hellfire. And this is the argumentation between them. Right? So these people, they will also, even if they try to free themselves in the hereafter, freeing themselves now will be of no benefit to them whatsoever. And so the Shaykh mentions an ayah here, وَمَنْ أَضَلُّ مِمَّنْ يَدْعُو مِنْ دُونِ اللَّهِ مَنْ لَا يَسْتَجِيبُ لَهُ إِلَى يَوْمِ الْقِيَامَةِ وَهُمْ عَنْ دُعَائِهِمْ غَافِلُونَ وَإِذَا حُشِرَ النَّاسُ كَانُوا لَهُمْ أَعْدَاءً وَكَانُوا بِعِبَادَتِهِمْ كَافِرِينَ. Surah Al-Ahqaf 46 verses 5 and 6. Who is more astray than the one who calls upon those besides Allah, those who do not respond to him, are not able to respond to him until the Day of Judgment, and they are heedless of their dua, of their invocation. And when the people will be resurrected or raised or gathered, they will be enemies to them, and they will disbelieve in the worship that was given to them. So every person will disbelieve in whatever worship was given besides Allah. But only the person whose rejection was truthful and sincere, which are the angels and the prophets and the messengers, right, the righteous people, whether from the men or from the jinn, whatever, who were not pleased that they should be worshipped to begin with, then they are the ones who will benefit from this bara'ah. But as for the ones who are pleased and affirmed this worship, then they are the ones whose bara'ah will not benefit them. And the love that they used to have between the worship and the worshipped in this life will become enmity and hatred in the hereafter. It will turn and become enmity and hatred. And this is also ayat in the Quran in relation to that. So the khulla will turn into bughd and maqt, right? Hatred, enmity will change. So this is the second. And the third, the third point the Shaykh mentions is that these people who are pleased that they were worshipped, even if they were people who claim to be Muslim, people of Hajj, people of Ibadah, people of Salat, people of Sadaqah, all of that, and they were engaged in this practice, then they become disbelievers. They become disbelievers. Inna Allah la yahdi man huwa kadhibun kafar. That's what the verse says, right? Indeed, Allah does not guide the one who is a liar, a disbeliever. So they are liars and disbelievers because of what they did, and irrespective of all the other deeds that they do, which is Hajj, Salah, Sadaqah, and so on and so forth. If you are engaged in this action which is shirk, all of that is of no benefit. So for that reason the Shaykh makes the point here, saying that anyone who is put to trial by taqleed, making blind following of these types of people, of these evil scholars, the people of deviation, and who venerate them, then they give them this position. They must repent to Allah Azza wa Jal and follow the path of the Salihin, the righteous people from the Sahaba, from the Tabi'een, and those who are pleased with Allah as their Lord, Islam as their religion, and Muhammad ﷺ as their prophet. So any person who is upon this, right, he's upon this way, and then the proof comes to him, the hujjah risaliyah, meaning the hujjah from the revelation comes to him, and then he chooses to remain upon that, then he is a mushrik, whether he likes it or not. And if he dies upon shirk, and he dies as a disbeliever, khalidun mukhalladun fin nar. So this is the end of the explanation of the Shaykh, and we'll conclude. This concludes our discussion of the second Nawaqid. And so the second Nawaqid is taking of wasa'it, intermediaries. And what do we mean by intermediaries? We mean that you take these people as a means of acquiring intercession, and likewise as a means of acquiring nearness to Allah Azza wa Jal. And those two ayat that we mentioned are key ayat in relation to this topic. And so we need to distinguish between the types of wasa'it. There is the prophets and messengers, intermediaries of knowledge, the scholars who are the inheritors, who are a branch of that first intermediary, they are the second intermediary. So whoever does not follow the first is a disbeliever. Whoever does not follow the second is either a jahil or a sahibu hawa, someone who's misguided and astray. And what leads these people into this is seeking intercession and seeking nearness. And each of those two verses address each of these two matters. So the Shaykh broke it down really nicely. So with that we'll conclude the discussion of the second Nawaqid, and inshallah ta'ala we'll continue with the third Nawaqid in the next lesson inshallah ta'ala. With that we'll conclude our lesson today. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.